Welcome back to Kingston Reviews. Derek here. Thank you guys for tuning into another video. Really appreciate it. Today's video is going to be about Kamala Harris and her views on how she's going to solve inflation. So a few weeks ago, she was actually asked a question about how is she going to solve inflation. And it's my belief that she has absolutely no idea how she's going to do that. In fact, all of her policies are actually going to increase inflation. So today's video, we're going to talk about that, what inflation is, and how they measure that. So if you guys like content like this, please don't forget to like, comment. This is a conversation. I'd like you guys to comment about it and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and let's get into the video. So let's talk about the first major issue, inflation, that any presidential candidate will need to address and what it is. Inflation is defined as the overall increase of goods and the price of goods and services over a given period of time. Let's go ahead and take a look at supply and demand and how that creates inflation.
In general, the demand for goods and services in an economy is greater than the supply, causing prices to rise and therefore inflation. Governments can control the inflation rate by adjusting the supply of money in the economy.
All right, so the next thing to consider is what do they use to calculate inflation? One of the things that we look at when we're looking at inflation is the CPI, the Consumer Price Index.
The Consumer Price Index estimates the change in prices for a basket of goods and services that represents the average household spending. The department in charge of the index, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or BLS, looks at several categories, each given a different importance, to compute the month's percent change.
So let's watch another quick video that talks about the relationship between supply and demand, a little bit more detail, and give a little bit of the historical history that we've been studying this for hundreds of years.
In 1691, John Locke was among the first to explain the relationship between supply and demand. In a letter to England's Parliament, he wrote, quote, "The price of any commodity rises or falls by the proportion of the number of buyers and sellers." In 1776, Adam Smith also explained the concepts in his influential book, Wealth of Nations. He wrote, quote, "When the quantity of any commodity falls short of the effectual demand, all those who are willing to pay cannot be supplied with the quantity which they want. Some of them will be willing to give more. A competition will begin among them, and the market price will rise."
Okay, so what this means and how this translates to us is during the C virus, we basically printed money, which gave us a ton of supply of money. Well, if there's a huge supply of money, then the price of goods and services based on this economic law are going to increase because people are able to pay more for goods and services. So as the government printed money, this created the effect of having the price of goods and services increase. So let's take a look and see what Ronald Reagan had to say about inflation and how the government is connected to that.
Governments, federal, state, and local, were only taking about 15 cents out of every dollar earned. Today, they're taking almost half of every dollar earned in the United States. And most people don't realize it because the taxes are hidden in the so-called business taxes. You know, the politician that stands up and yells, "Oh, let's save the little man, let's tax business," and everybody yells, "Hooray." But they haven't figured out that every tax on business is just a part of the cost of production. And the customer winds up paying it when he buys the product. It's a hidden sales tax. There's 116 of them in the suit of clothes that each one of us is wearing.
So what did Ronald Reagan mean by a hidden tax in inflation? So essentially what he's saying is when we increase taxes on business or increase the cost of products, goods, and services, businesses pass it on to the consumer. A lot of people may not understand this, but let's think about it. A business or a corporation is basically an individual in the eyes of the government formed for the purposes of making money. So if you charge my business more money to do business, I'm not just going to lose money. I'm going to pass that cost on to my customers. My customers in turn pass that cost on to their customers, so on and so forth, increasing the cost of goods and services and increasing inflation. So now that we have a good idea about supply and demand and what inflation is, let's see what Kamala's solution to inflation is. And keep in mind that these are laws of physics, right? For money. So we've got to figure out what the solution is. We can't solve it with words. We've got to solve it by changing something in the equation to get the result that we want. So let's see what she has to say.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you would prevent the new spending in your Build Back Better agenda from exacerbating the problem? And also, what else are you going to do to fix this problem with inflation?
All right, thank you. Well, let's start with this.
So I actually timed her after the question was asked. She took about 3 to 4 seconds to scan her brain to try to figure out how she was going to answer this. Now, I want you to really think about this. If you're running for president, shouldn't you already have the answer to this question?
Prices have gone up.
Word.
And families and individuals
She absolutely has
are
no
dealing
idea what to say.
with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more.
Word.
And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up. That's about having to stress and stretch limited resources.
You're a dummy, bitch. You will never know shit.
That's about a source of stress for families that is not only economic, but is on a daily level, something that is a heavy weight to carry. So it is something that we take very seriously.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
She hasn't said anything
Very
yet.
seriously.
Right?
And we know from the history of this issue in the United States that when you see these prices go up, it has a direct impact on the quality of life for all people in our country. So it's a big issue, and we take it seriously. And it is a priority, therefore. So we have addressed it in a number of ways. One of the issues that we know is related to this is to be an active port, and we have seen a reduction in the container ship of the Long Beach and LA ports because of what we have done, which is to extend, as you know, to extend the hours to now 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But there is also a point that is important to make on the Build Back Better framework. One, it is less expensive for working people to live.
Still hasn't said how.
Specifically designed to bring down the costs of childcare and increase.
So there's a couple things about these economic principles, right? They're almost like gravity. They're the physics for economics, right? You can't get away from them. You've got to address the key causes of inflation. Remember the supply and demand that we talked about briefly earlier. So one of the things that cause inflation is demand pull inflation. When the demand for goods and services is higher than the supply of goods and services. Or you have cost push inflation, where the cost to produce goods and services is higher so that businesses pass that on to the consumers, right? So she's got to address one or two of these issues to be able to solve the problem. It's not that difficult, right? You're going to have to lower the cost of goods and services somehow. Businesses are going to pass that on to the consumer. Whatever cost that they have, they're going to pass that on.
Her campaign endorsing a plan that calls for increasing the top tax rate on long-term cap gains from 20 to 44.6%. That would be the highest rate ever in U.S. history. So if you're in New York, you sold some stock, you're above that income level, the combined city, state, and federal rate would be 55.5%. If you're in California, would be just under 58%.
So if that's not bad enough, look what she's coming up with next.
She's also calling for a tax on unrealized gains for those with a net worth of more than $100 million. So that would call for a minimum tax of 25% on unrealized gains. So even if you didn't sell something and it gained in value during that year. So they would be taxed on any annual increase in the asset or value, again, even if you didn't sell.
All right, so if you just caught a couple of those points, essentially, like New York State could have an effective tax rate very close to 60%. It's like 55%. So you're essentially paying more in taxes than what you're actually making. Absolutely ridiculous. Then, on top of that, she's looking to tax unrealized gains. So the gains that you've had, but you actually haven't received. So if you have a house and the value went up, perhaps, or if you have a stock and the value went up and you actually didn't cash in the stock, she's saying that she wants to be able to tax this. If you talk about shutting the economy down, you do that. These are things that will absolutely shut the economy down. All right, so I wanted to take a quick look at a video from Ronald Reagan, which Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump have a lot of similarities in the way that they're looking to solve problems. They want Americans to solve problems for America, right? They don't want to take from the rich and give to the poor. That mentality will leave everyone poor. But let's go ahead and listen to what he has to say.
We will unleash the energy and genius of the American people, traits which have never failed us. We can create the incentives which take advantage of the genius of our economic system. A system, as Walter Lippmann observed more than 40 years ago, which for the first time in history gave men, quote, a way of producing wealth in which the good fortune of others multiplied their own, unquote. Our aim is to increase our national wealth so all will have more, not just redistribute what we already have, which is just a sharing of scarcity.
All right, so if you guys didn't catch that, what he was saying was our aim is always to increase our national wealth so all can have more, instead of redistributing that wealth, because that's a sharing of scarcity, right? The mindset that the Democrats have is that there's just so much wealth, and if we just take it from the people and share it, then we can make everybody more equal, or as they say today, equity, right? More equitable. However, the reality is that if you take 60% of what someone makes, you're not going to motivate them to create wealth that can be shared with more people. All right, so I'm actually going to go ahead and end the video here, but before I do, I wanted you guys to know just how difficult it has been to find information on Kamala Harris's current economic plan. You have to understand how unusual this is. She's not doing any interviews. She's not doing any speeches. She's not doing any campaigning where they're actually talking about what she's planning to do. Literally, the only interviews I could really find was her Lester Holt interview from almost 3 years ago about immigration, her DNC speech, and that's about it. A few blurbs here or there, but not any long form content about what she plans to do to help America and our economic issues. And I think this is absolutely amazing that the Democrat Party and you Democrats that are going to vote for her when she's not even willing to discuss her solutions to the problems. So if you guys like content like this, please don't forget to like, comment, we should be having a conversation here, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you guys for tuning in, and have a great day.